I saw this article pop up on my feed and I thought it was interesting. So I pulled it up. And on the one hand, it seems to be a little bit like rage baiting initially, but it actually seems pretty. I think it's a genuine article. I think it's genuine. Okay. Spider-Man 2 looks like a movie I've already seen twice. I remember walking out of the theater in 2018 after watching Into the Spider-Verse, completely overwhelmed by what its creators had achieved. Back then, I believed it marked the end of an era of forced adaptations that followed the well-known patterns about one of the most popular superheroes ever, who had already starred in 8 movies and countless games. This year, the arrival of Across the Spider-Verse, that feeling was reinforced, as it proved once again that captivating stories and characters could successfully break away from their past iterations. And yet, following the beaten path seems exactly what Insomniac is doing with its upcoming Spider-Man 2. Instead of taking risks, the game appears somewhat generic on the surface, lacking originality and imagination at every turn. It's like the studio is playing it safe, sticking too closely to the established canon we've seen in other Spider-Man films and games for ages. I'm not saying the Spider-Man 2 looks bad or will be a bad game. We can't judge it fully until it's released and we get to play it. However, based on what Insomniac has shown us so far, I'm not feeling very enthusiastic. The game appears to rely heavily on tired Spider-Man tropes from the past decade, with only minor changes to characters, villains, and their relationships. Oh look, there's Venom in the game. How cool is that? He even looks and sounds exactly like the Venom we've already seen in the 2007 Spider-Man 3 and Tom Hardy Venom movies. It would have been great to see a fresh take on the iconic anti-hero, but instead, it feels like the game is just recycling what came before, and I find little joy in it. Then he goes through a bunch of other things that he feels frustrated by with regard to kind of recycling already established characters, settings, plot devices, all sorts of stuff. And he describes how it just isn't that compelling to him coming off of Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, which I think is a genuine thing. I don't think this guy's writing this to bait. This is from Vlad Mazanko, by the way. I don't think he's trying to bait anything. I just think he's honestly like coming off of Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, 2 amazing movies, extremely creative. He's just like, you know what? I just feel like this is very milquetoast. This is very safe. This is very bland in comparison, which frankly, from what we've seen, kind of is. But I think it's important to note Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man on PS4 and Miles Morales on PS4 or PS5, I guess. They're not trying to be Into the Spider-Verse. They're not trying to be Across the Spider-Verse. They're not trying to do the same thing. Like those movies were trying to do something very novel, very different, very creative, and something that nobody had ever seen before. And they really cranked those knobs and did something wild. Whereas the games are much more about like safe, I think, fan service in a way. They're not trying to do anything wacky. They're trying to deliver a solid game where you can play as Spider-Man and Miles Morales and MJ and now Venom, and you can live out that fantasy in a Spider-Man story swinging around New York, or in this case, in this game, will be flying as well. And so I think they're both achieving what they're setting out to do. I think there are things I've seen a lot of people express, concerns or frustration or anxiety about, say, the fact that Spider-Man 2 looks very similar to Spider-Man on PS4, and they're not sure how much it's actually going to bring to the table that's different. And that's something I've said for a long time, that I personally don't know how you make a second game with the same map effectively and make it feel really fresh and unique without it getting stale after a few hours, because you've basically been there, done that. And with Spider-Man, it's New York. They're adding some bureaus, so making it a little bit bigger and better, but it's still a concern. With Tears of the Kingdom, probably the most recent direct example, that's another game where they basically recycled the same map and they reworked it, and they added the depths, and then they added the sky sections, the sky islands, And it worked really well, but it's still fundamentally Hyrule. It's still the same map that we had in Breath of the Wild, reworked a little bit. And frankly, anecdotal, so it's not something like evidence or proof or anything. But my anecdotal experience is that Tears of the Kingdom has, for me, gotten a little dry after 60 hours or so of gameplay, which is still an insane amount, to be fair. But I've gone through, cleared the map, gotten a ton of shrines, I've done a ton of stuff in the game, and I just currently feel like I don't have the urge to go and explore every nook and cranny of Hyrule like I had with the first game, Breath of the Wild, because I've been there, done that. I've already been to those corners of the map. I've already seen what that looks like. And yes, now there's probably new encounters and new stuff, but fundamentally it's just not as exciting because I've already seen that. I've already been to that corner of the map. I've already been on top of Mount Doom to trigger the Nintendo fanboys. But it's still a great game, but it got a little dry. It got a little dry because I've already seen that. So I do think there are concerns that people have had with how are they going to make Spider-Man 2 feel really fresh with it being set in New York again, with some other stuff. But honestly, like, if anybody could figure it out, it would be Insomniac. They're a phenomenal team of developers. They really know what they're doing. And here's the other thing that is just important to remember. We don't know what we don't know. Nobody knew about the depths until Tears of the Kingdom came out. They didn't talk about that at all before the game came out. Actually, it's not called Mount Doom. Nobody talked about the depths. Nobody had any idea that was in the game at all. And that's the size of Hyrule, just underground. So there was basically another map that they just never talked about. So you never know what they have up their sleeves, for one. Two, we're sitting here kind of chatting about the game, and we're like, I don't know how they would make New York as exciting or how they would make this compelling in another game. And then we move on and we talk about something else. These guys are going into the office and working on this game for years. Every day, Monday through Friday. And they're talking with other developers who have had ideas through all the development of the first game and are trying actively to come up with ways to make it more exciting with the second game. And they figure it out. God of War Ragnarok managed to pull it off. And a lot of people had the same concern about that. So, while I understand the concerns and the frustrations and the anxieties around it, I think at the end of the day, we don't know what we don't know. A lot of the time, these devs have some tricks up their sleeves that they keep hidden before the game launches because they want it to be a surprise, of course. Why show their hand if they don't have to? And frankly, if a talented and capable dev team puts a game together, usually it just gets better and better. So I'm looking at Spider-Man 2 and I'm expecting it to be awesome. Insomniac is an incredibly capable team. And while while I can acknowledge the concerns about making the game set in the same place and reusing a lot of stuff, I can also acknowledge that they thought about all of this 4 or 5 years ago and came up with solutions that they felt answered those concerns and then started work in developing this game. So my guess is they've already taken care of it. He took my thing.